Welcome to the podcast We Are Made for More with Megan Alexander. In this podcast, we'll strive to inspire people around the world to become the best version of themselves by featuring guests with experiences and mindsets that demonstrate that we are all made for more.
In this episode, Megan talks with Steve Schweidel, a music business engineer, producer, and manager. He shares his journey from New York to Nashville of working with diverse industry icons such as Paul Simon, Tony Bennett, Big and Rich, Jewel, and more. Hear how he faced his challenges, the tools he used to overcome them, and how his vision of seeing himself succeed made him do exactly that.
All right. Well, welcome to We Are Made for More. I'm your host, Megan Alexander. This is my podcast. And so I have a special guest for you today, a longtime friend of mine. His name is Steve Schweidel from Schweidel Productions. Welcome, Steve.
Hello. Thank you. Hearing special guest is such a weird thing. I'm not special. I'm just Schweidel. It's just me.
I love it. I love it. But here's the thing. You are special. Definitely special to me.
Oh.
Definitely special to the world. Lots to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. But special, you're right. Special guest. That's funny because we're friends. We go way back.
We do. Yeah. I mean, the chance to do this with you is so much fun. Like, I'm just having fun already and we haven't even started.
Same here. I think I already have the perma smile on. So
Yeah.
We'll see how long that stays on for this conversation, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about you, Meg, is anytime we talk, it's always so natural. You know, I know we're technically recording right now, but it doesn't feel that way. I feel like I'm just looking at you on a FaceTime call and we're just talking. I love it.
That's so true. That's so true. So I'm going to put in my head that's what it should feel like, right?
Yeah.
Let's just keep it natural. So this is my second podcast, Steve.
Congratulations. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being a guest. But I want to say too, this is my first one doing remotely, virtually like this. So definitely
you're doing a fabulous job.
Well, thank you. We're a minute in. We'll see. You're doing a fabulous job.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yourself. So as you know, I finally named it. My first podcast came out and I didn't have a name before I had started it, but I have named it and it's called, I'm going to move my head out of the way, We Are Made for More. And I wonder, just to kick off our conversation, when you heard that I had done this podcast and that was the title of it, do you have any thoughts about what We Are Made for More meant to you? Did anything come across?
You know, I didn't have initial thoughts, but truthfully, and I know you and I have spoken about this at different times, just about what is purpose? What am I here for? What are we here for? You know, and I think that in everyday life, I ask myself, am I doing what I can be doing to serve other people as well as myself? And is it fulfilling me? And I think the phrase, we are made for more, it's so true. I think, in so many ways, our lives are not that. We get so wrapped up in the world today of social media and things that absolutely mean nothing. It may mean something to someone in the moment, but that's all it is. It's this little moment, and we've put so much emphasis on it. So I do believe we're made for more. And truthfully, for me, I know that every day I have more to give than I do. And it's not because I'm not trying. It's just not focusing on that every day. It's very easy not to give 1,000% every single moment of every day. And of course, that's impossible too.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But, when I think about you, Steve, I started off by saying we go way back, and we do. I think I've known you about 20 years now. Yeah. If I'm doing the math right.
You are.
And it's a funny thing. I will mention, this isn't the first time I've interviewed you. It was just a different circumstance.
It's true.
We
you
actually
gave me
worked,
a job.
There you go.
Yeah.
I did. Well, you know what? You were selected. And I'll tell you because of who you are. And the funny thing is we worked together for a little bit, but we became friends over the years
Yeah.
and remained in touch.
We did. It's one of my I believe one of my personal skills, something I'm really good at, always have been, is relationships and keeping relationships. And while you and I may not have worked together now for probably 19 years, we've stayed in touch those 19 years. And that's really important to me because you personally made a mark on me. And I hope that I did as well to you, but the fact that we're here talking, I know
you're my second guest on the podcast.
I know you're looking at me like, you're like, Steve, come on. Let's stop this nonsense. Of course you made a mark on me, but really, I mean, it's a true mark of a beautiful friendship that here we are, 20 years later, we haven't worked together in 19 of those years, but we've stayed in touch through all of it, through the ups, the downs, every bit of it. And that's really special.
That's absolutely true. I couldn't agree more. As you just say, the ups and the downs. I think about a lot of the stories that we've, the times we just pick up the phone and call each other. And sometimes it'd be a year went by and we hadn't heard from each other. But if we were going through something, we always felt comfortable reaching out and picking up the phone and saying, hey, whether it was to cheer each other on for something we did see in social media, or to say, hey, I'm going through something. I miss you. I need to catch up.
Yeah.
And that really helps. So
it really does. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I will say that the job that you hired me or selected me for back then, I believe, and this is the power of positivity, I willed that job for myself. I left another state, as you know. I was living in Tennessee at the time, and I moved back to New York. And when I interviewed for that position, I had told everybody when I left Nashville, I'm going to get that job. I'm going to work at that company. And people said, that's crazy. How do you know that? Have you applied? Has somebody told you that they're interested? And I said, no, none of that. And they all thought I was nuts. And,
wow.
I
didn't know that about your story.
Yeah,
but that does make sense. Yeah. And another thing I think about when I recall back to the early days of our friendship is you were somebody that just stood out from others. And in the job that we worked in together, I can't go into too much detail about it, but you were somebody that it came naturally to you because you were having conversations with people every day. That's what it was. And people respected you for that, just for your authenticity and who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. That feels good to hear.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily recognize that all the time. So it's difficult and nice at the same time to hear that.
Well, that's cool. So you just mentioned you went from Tennessee to New York, and I was going to even say in part of the intro, Steve has gone from New York to Nashville to Minnesota, but you do have a whole journey. So tell us a little bit about your story, about Steve Schweidel.
Oh my gosh. So
where do you start?
I guess I start when I grew up, right? I grew up in Jersey. So as a Jersey boy, I don't sing like those guys though. But I grew up in Jersey. I think I had what I would call a normal childhood. What childhood is not normal? I mean, I had divorced parents, and it was a difficult time as a kid, but I don't think that it was abnormal. I just had a normal childhood, and I had passion for music. And I think at one point in my life, I thought I'd be a musician. But early on, when I was in high school and maybe even middle school, I realized I am not going to be a musician. All of my friends are running circles musically around me, and that's okay. But I knew I loved music. So I got into recording music. And I started that when I was in high school. And it was the early times of digital music. It was the days of, crappy keyboards and this technology called MIDI, MIDI.
Yes.
And I had this recording set up. I mean, in the early to mid 90s. And, some of it was on a little tape deck recorder, and I had just cassette decks, and it was a 4-track, and I was so psyched about that. But then when the computer stuff started to come into play, I got to record on the computer and mix it into the analog, and it was just a blast. So I knew that was something I was really interested in.
Okay.
So after high school, I moved to Philadelphia. I went to the Art Institute of Philadelphia. I studied music business there, which is what I have a degree in. But I emphasized in recording, and it gave me a good foundation. It gave me more tools. And I took those tools, and while I was still in college, I got hired at a radio and TV commercial recording studio in Philadelphia, and I was the tape guy. I was in a small room, smaller than I know you can't see my room here right now, but it was smaller than this room, and this room is small. And I had all these reel-to-reel tape machines. And I would hit play and record on these reel-to-reel machines. I had a master, and the master was recording on like 8 different reel-to-reel machines. And when the radio commercial was over, I'd hit stop on all of them. I'd cut the tape. I'd put it in a box. I'd label it, and I'd send it off to these radio stations. And it was a friggin' blast. It was kind of like, I really felt like I was doing something insane, and I was brilliant, even though it was something so simple,
Sounds cool.
It was a blast. It really was. And so there was a guy, his name was Keith. His name still is Keith. I saw him somewhat recently. And he was the national voiceover for Dodge, specifically the Dodge Neon commercial. If you remember the Dodge Neon, I mean,
absolutely.
It's like, oh my gosh.
I do.
He was doing commercials, and he comes back to the tape room, and he's like, "So I hear you're the music guy." And I said, "I am." And he said, "Well, look, I'm a musician. I used to be in a band. I'm in a band now. The band I was in is no longer together, but I got to play a gig this week. Do you want to record sound for me?" Or I'm sorry, not record, but run sound for me at the club. I said, "Sure." So I went down to this club in a little town called Manayunk, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia, ran sound. And the next day he called me and he said, "Steve," and actually he named me, you know me as Schwei.
I do.
He named me Schwa, SCHWA, which Schwa
de Vivre.
Yeah, Schwa de Vivre. And so he literally, he said, "Steve, do you want to come on the road with me?" He said, "I got to go on the road for about 6 weeks. I need a van driver and a sound guy. Would you do it?" And I said, "Man, if my job lets me, I'm there." So I went to my boss, who knew my passion for music. He was super supportive. I'm still in touch with him as well. He's retired. But literally, he was very supportive. He said, "Yes, go do it," and I did. And we went through Nashville. That's where Keith's record label was. And I fell in love with the town. It was so different than anything I was used to. It was really sleepy, but here I am driving down this road called Music Row. And I was like, how cool is this? A town that's Music Row. So I literally, we went back to Pennsylvania after 6 weeks, and I knew I had to get to Nashville. And so I picked up, this was 97. I picked up and I moved to Nashville. I was in Nashville for, about not even 2 years, about a year.
Okay.
And it was my first experience of just feeling like I didn't fit in. And it sucked.
Really?
Yeah, it sucked because I knew I did fit in, but the town was really closed off at that time. It was like, they call it like the good old boy network.
Okay.
And it
Cliquish.
was like, and it was like, if you weren't from there and grew up there, you were an outsider. And I was an outsider, and even worse, I was from the North, so I was, gung ho and a go getter, and I was moving too fast for everything. So I found some work, I mean, literally a week and a half after living in Nashville, a huge tornado blew through. I mean, it's just crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And I wound up working at a dub house, a same similar type of gig that I was doing in Pennsylvania, except it was music only. And the guy who owned the studio, he was the guy behind the Budweiser commercials. If you remember, Budweiser, the Bud Frogs. He
Wow.
did the Bud Frogs.
Way
I mean,
back. Okay.
talk about some serious coin, right?
Okay.
So I worked for him for a while, but at the same time, I was folding jeans at the Gap. I mean, I was working I was waiting tables, I was bartending, I was doing whatever I could just to survive because I wanted it to work so bad.
Okay.
And
I don't even know this story about you. All
yeah,
this,
well,
I don't.
no, well, we probably never
It's
talked
detail.
about it. It
Yeah.
happened before you and I knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I wound up moving back to New York because I was like, this isn't
Okay.
working out. So I go back to New York, and what do? I take my resume, New York City. I go to every major recording studio, probably 30 to 40 studios. I spent that day, I dropped off my resume everywhere. Electric Lady, Sony. I mean, the Hit Factory was one, which I'll get back to in a second. The Power Station. I mean, most of these studios are not there anymore. Some are.
Okay.
And it was insane because I'm just dropping off my resume. I don't know anybody. And I'm thinking, okay, I've reached my end of the day. I'm going to my last studio. The last studio was like the biggest of them all, the Hit Factory. I mean,
I definitely have heard of that one.
Oh, God. I mean, the
Everybody
studio
has.
was famous for so many amazing records. I mean, you know, Graceland, you name it, you know, Paul Simon, Graceland, huge records. And I was intimidated, but so excited just to even walk in the door to be able to hand somebody something. And I walk in and it's all glass doors, and I walk in and there's a security guard at a security desk, and then another set of glass doors, and you can see through, and it's gold and platinum records. I mean, wall to wall. And
So you didn't
like,
have an appointment. You just walked in.
oh no, I just walked in. And
you're going door to door. Yeah.
Yeah, nice security guard. But he said, you know, what are you here for? And I said, I'm looking for a job. I'm a recording engineer. And he said, well, you have your resume? And I said, I do, you know, and he wouldn't let me through the other doors. He said, I promise you this is going to get to the right person. And I'm thinking like, no, it's not. And I kind of argued a little with it. I'm like, you're just giving me a line. I said, I've been walking to studio after studio. He said, trust me, it's going to get to the right place. What happens? By the time I got back to my apartment in New York City, I had a phone call with a message from the owner of the studio saying, perfect timing. I got your resume. We're hiring. You know, why don't you come in tomorrow? So I wound up in there the next day. Yeah. It was crazy. I did get hired on the spot, but I was hired as a grunt. I mean, literally a grunt.
But you wanted to just get in the door.
My foot was now in the door. I didn't care if I was cleaning toilets, and I was sweeping floors. I was doing errands. I mean, I literally was told, you know, this artist needs Campbell's soup. It's got to be this kind, this flavor, you know, these shape noodles. I mean, crazy stuff. And here I am running all over New York City doing it.
And you did it.
I did it. And what really changed for me was through it all, Meg. Is it okay if I call you Meg?
Absolutely.
I love it.
Schweidel.
Thank you. So, Meg, literally, I was just being me. I don't know how to be somebody I'm not. It just doesn't work. If I'm not authentic, you're going to know. And I was just being Schwei. I was me. And clearly, the owner and other people at the studio saw that, and they saw me for who I was. And I got called into the boss's office, and he said, I'm going to give you the shot of the lifetime. He said, I need somebody to be another engineer on a Paul Simon record. And he said, I'm going to trust you with that, assuming you want it. And I'm like holding back the excitement, because the last thing I want to do is be like a you know, like starstruck, but
over eager. No.
But Paul Simon, oh my God, like hello.
Right, the first person you're going to record. Like,
yeah.
Talk about that level automatically.
So I said, absolutely, whatever you need. Well, I was doing like 165-hour weeks because I'm
Wow.
working with Paul Simon, and he records to get to watch his process, him recording a full record in the studio, not
Hmm.
coming prepared with songs and tracks, just building it all from nothing was amazing. I mean, the guy is just brilliant. And at the same time, I'm working on that, and then that afforded me other opportunities. So now all of a sudden I'm engineering, rap and hip hop records at night. And I mean, I'm sleeping at the studio. I had a bed blown up behind the console. It was nuts.
Seriously.
It was
Oh
nuts.
my goodness. Do they
And
shower? You shower there and everything? Do they
oh
have
yeah,
that kind of facility? Yeah.
everything. Oh yeah. And so I lived there for a full solid another year and a half.
Okay.
And I got burnt. I was really burnt.
Mm. I was
At
just going to ask, how do you do that? How do
I
you,
got
what
burnt.
happens?
I did. I was fried. And I was working so hard. I mean, I worked on Tony Bennett records, Paul
Oh,
Simon, Billy Joel. I got to do a track with Billy Joel. Before Beyonce was Beyonce, when it was, oh God, the three girls.
yes.
Destiny's Child. Oh my
Destiny's.
God.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a gold
Destiny's Child.
record of theirs and a platinum one. But
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
like, I got to work on some really cool stuff, but it really fried me. I mean,
Mhm.
I was just unhealthy at that point. And I said to myself, I'm going to get through this Paul Simon record, and then I'm going back to Nashville. Because now I had it in my head that, wait a minute, there's no way, no matter what I experienced the first time, there's no way now with the experience and the technology and my skills that I've learned. I'm an A-lister now in terms of
Yeah.
the things I learned. And I did. I finished that record with Paul, and I wound up going back to Nashville.
Before you get to that, because obviously
Yeah.
I want to hear about that story. How were you not able to tell them, hey, I want a break? Or was that your choice? Or was it the circumstances
It was a
to
little
say I
of
want a
both.
normal work week? Yeah.
It was a little of both. I mean, my boss, he gave me the freedom, like, hey, you don't have to work as much as you're working. But I also knew it was a way to get my chops to where they needed to be.
Yeah.
And I was young, and when
Right.
you're young, like, you don't think about long term or you just go.
You're on go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I went and went and went until I just couldn't go anymore,
Mhm.
and I just knew that I just had to finish that record, and then I had to go because
Yeah.
I knew it was my only way out. The other thing is I started to really decide what I loved to work on and what I didn't, and what, worked for me and what fed my soul.
Mhm.
And there were things that I was working on that just didn't. It just didn't feed
Mhm.
my soul. And I knew that there was no perfect recipe, but I wanted that, opportunity to try and work on as much as on music that really fed my soul. And I
Right.
knew that the songwriting in Nashville was so deep and so beautiful, similar to, the songs that Paul Simon would write.
Yeah.
They had substance. So
So you went back to Nashville.
I went back to Nashville, and sure enough, I was right. People listened this time.
Mhm. You had something under your belt.
And what I really had under my belt was Pro Tools, which was technology, still is, and
Mhm.
it became the biggest digital recording technology. Pro Tools had not reached Nashville yet. They were using a different technology, ADAT tapes. And so I come in and I have the chops on Pro Tools, and vocal tuning had become a big thing.
Mm.
So I got hired. I wound up buying my own rig. It was very expensive, but I bought my own equipment, and I had a cartage company that would bring my equipment to whatever studio I was working at. And I was tuning vocals for a lot of big artists. And it was a blast. I was also just editing tracks. It was a
Mhm.
lot of fun,
So Steve, let's talk about this for 1 second. I mean, you
Yeah.
just name dropped a ton of people that anybody
Hang
listening to
on,
this
let me pick them up. Oh, here it is.
would love to meet just one of these people. And you make it sound like, oh yeah, I just worked with this one, this one, this one, and all of these greats. What were there any situations with any of those people that were nerve-wracking to meet them in the room, or did they have an instant respect for you because of your role? What was that like?
So there, there's a little story here to tell you. Every artist is different.
Sure.
And I would say that 9 times out of 10, I had amazing experiences. I wasn't starstruck. I just went in, I did the work, and it was just a job. And these people, I looked at them no different than hopefully they were looking at me. Like, this guy knows what he's doing. He does his thing. I do mine. It was fine. But there were some weird situations. And of course, I'm not going to mention names, but,
of course.
But one night, one of the artists I was working with came in and put a Glock 9 pistol on the console.
Oh boy.
And now, can I don't know what the rules are here. Am I allowed to say a curse word? Or am I
sure. I'm being told I might have to bleep it out. Maybe the letter of it.
You could always bleep it. But literally, this guy says to me, "You gonna make my shit right?" and throws this gun down. And it was like, my heart starts pounding, and I'm like, is this guy serious? And part of me thinks he might have been, but now that I look back on it, I think he wasn't. I think it was like his own version of humor.
Okay.
At the time, I didn't think it was funny, but I can look back now and, for what it's worth, that person, who I'm not going to mention, happens to be a billionaire now. So,
oh my goodness.
I mean, it's like, he wasn't being serious, but, again, at the time I didn't know that. And I was,
you didn't know him. You didn't. Yeah,
no.
Exactly.
And
it's scary.
I had all sorts of weird experiences. I mean, people calling me a skinhead. Like, I used to shave my head really shorter than this, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm a Jewish skinhead. Go figure. Like,
right. It doesn't
people
fit.
There's a lot of ignorance out there in the world,
right.
and I certainly got different aspects of that. But, there was only one time that I really, like, my heart kind of dropped and I got starstruck, and I hadn't even seen the artist. And it's when Michael Jackson came into the studio.
Oh my goodness.
He comes in, and I think it's the way that his people took care of him that created that excitement in me that my body just couldn't control. And it was like, okay, all of a sudden, every light in the entire building goes out. And there was this service elevator that a car could pull up on the street and pull right into and close. And so, they open the other side of this garage door on the inside of the studio, and a hallway of the studio, and it's Michael Jackson, but all the lights are out, and he's walking right by me, and I'm just like, my God, like,
that's crazy.
That's nuts.
Yeah. I can't even believe all these names that you've just mentioned. It's pretty special. It's
awesome to have had those experiences, those opportunities. Again,
but there's more. Like, if you think about, we've just touched the surface. Those people listening are hearing this saying, wow, this is pretty incredible to hear someone who started out in the music business. And we got to flash forward to some of the stories of where you've gone from there.
I know. I need to move on from New York, right? I need to move you back to Nashville. Because
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So I go back to Nashville. I'm working in the studio. It's great. Everything's good until September 11th, 2001. And when, people say, the world stopped with COVID, I actually disagree. I think the world stopped for quite a while on September 11th, 2001.
Yeah.
And people don't necessarily remember as well as they remember COVID. COVID's recent, so it feels like it was yesterday. September 11th happened, and things really did stop. I mean, the world just stopped.
You're right.
And
the
music industry went into benefit mode. So artists were recording for benefit projects.
Yes.
And they were appearing for concerts to raise money, and it was all really great. And I got to be a part of some of it, but I was donating my time as a recording engineer. I
Okay.
didn't have a check that was coming in from anybody. I was a freelance gig worker.
Hmm.
And when September 11th happened, the world stopped, and so did my paychecks. So
Oh,
I was
goodness.
doing a lot of good stuff, but I wasn't getting paid for it. And I
Mhm.
don't think I was smart enough or advanced enough in life at that point to think about it as it was happening. And so, you know, I got in a bad way. I was spending more money because I wasn't making any money. So I was spending my savings. And then
Oh,
my
goodness. Yeah, that's
savings was
tough.
going away. Right. And then I would get a credit card and that was maxed out. So I get another credit card. I mean, I wound up in serious, serious financial trouble,
Hmm.
really bad. And so, while my studio work wasn't really picking back up, that's where it was like, okay, I got to find something. So what did I do? I become a barista at Starbucks.
Oh, my
I mean,
goodness.
and by the way, I was a damn good one. I
I
still
bet.
am. I'm my own best barista these days. In fact, I've been called the Heisenberg of coffee.
Oh,
If
my
you're
goodness.
familiar with the show Breaking Bad,
I
Heisenberg,
am. I
who
saw
made
the first season.
yeah, so he makes all the drugs, he makes the good stuff. I make the good coffee. I have a whole process. It's like I'm a scientist. Anyway, I'm working at Starbucks. And at the time, though, back in the first stint I did in Nashville, I became friends with Big Kenny and John Rich. And
Okay. This
most
is
people know them as Big and Rich.
Big and Rich country
But
duo.
yes, and at the time, though, in the early or the mid 90s when I met them, mid late 90s, it was just John Rich and Big Kenny. John had just finished being a member of Lone Star, which he was a founding
Hmm.
member. Kenny had just finished, he had a record deal on a rock record, and it had just gotten out of that deal because his rock career just didn't take over. And they had this thing called the Music Mafia. And
Mm.
it was, music being played by a bunch of friends, every week in this little club called the Pub of Love. And it was just like great songs that they were writing together. And they were showcasing other friends who were writing songs. And I mean, they were showcasing just beautiful songs. And it was like, hey, Steve does this. And I'm just using me as an example, but
Okay.
this is not true. But it was like, hey, Steve's really good at this. So we're going to showcase him doing that. That's what they were doing with young musicians. And it was really this
Mhm.
beautiful community. And so we became friends. And in fact, Big Kenny and I wrote a bunch of silly songs together back in the day. And I mean, I love those songs, but are,
Mhm.
are they for somebody else? No, they were for us. And it was great. And so now I'm back for the second time and I'm still recording, just not as much because September 11th happened. I need to make a living. So I'm working at Starbucks, which happens to be right down the street from where Big Kenny was living.
Yeah.
And so I'd finish work, I'd go to his house and we'd write songs
Yeah.
and we'd record them. We'd have a blast. In the same breath, Big and Rich were starting to write songs together as an act, although at the time they weren't Big and Rich yet.
Mhm.
And they were doing something for a performance rights organization. There's a couple of them, ASCAP, BMI, and they were doing one where a bunch of students from Berklee Music School in Boston had come down and they were teaching us how to write a song. And in the room that day, they wrote Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy.
Mm.
And a couple of days later, they were going in the studio with those same students to record, and I was one of the guys recording it. I was one of the engineers.
That's really
So
cool.
what I didn't know was that they were really going to get signed to Warner Brothers and a career was going to take off. So fast forward 2003, I've kind of had enough again. And
Mhm.
I'm like, I got to go back to New York. It just must not be my time to be here.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not going to mention the company that I wound up looking for work with, but I did tell people, hey, I'm going to leave Nashville. I'm going to go work for this company. They all think I'm nuts. Everybody's telling me not to do it.
Yeah.
And I leave. I move back to New York. I moved to Long Island. and I interviewed at that business with you. You selected me out of, I'm sure, tons of beautiful candidates, and I was lucky enough to be selected. Um, you and I got to work together for a while, for about a year, I think,
Yeah, it's about a
before
year.
I transferred within the company to another location into New
Hmm.
York City. And I had a blast in New York City. And I get a
But then the
call.
phone rang.
The phone
Yes.
rang. Yeah, I get a call. It's Big Kenny, and he's like, he called me the good Jewish reverend. and he said, Reverend Schwei, how are you? It's Big Kenny. And I was like, I'm doing great. He's like, how you liking your job? And I said, hey, it's a great job.
Hmm.
I got benefits. I got a good salary. And he's like, that's awesome. We're coming to New York City next week. We're playing CBGBs. It's a play for the media. You got to come. The record's going to come out soon. You got to be there. Said, all right, I'll come out. I said, why don't I hop out on the road? If you guys can spare some room, I'll come out for a week. And he
Mm.
said, oh, brother, you got to do it. So I go out for a week. I went to that show that night. I hopped on the bus in the middle of the night, and I'm on the road with them for a week. They were just doing radio stuff.
Hmm.
And Kenny said, we need a guitar tech. He said, you've met our tour manager. I can't give you that job, but we need a guitar tech. We're going on the road with Tim McGraw. We need you. You got to come out.
Unreal.
And
Unreal.
I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah.
So I came back to New York, and I met with my boss in New York City. And I said, I'm not the type of guy to put in my resignation with no notice, but I have a make or break decision, and I've decided I'm going to take this job. And this person actually, was very upset.
Mm.
Not just that I didn't give 2 weeks, but just was very upset in general. And I was like, really? Is this really happening? And he said, you're going to be so sorry you're leaving. You're just wasting your time. Nothing's ever going to come of this. And I kind of stayed me. Again, I'm a calm person. So I just stayed calm and moved on. And guess what?
Yeah.
It was the best decision I ever made in my life.
Right. Right. And who knows in those moments? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you can't tell, but you knew, you had a feeling that it was calling you,
Yeah.
the right thing to do.
And let's be honest, I'll fast forward just quick snippets of this, but I wound up becoming Big and Rich's tour manager,
Hmm.
extremely successful at it for years, and left them at the end of a tour and worked with Jewel. And
Platinum. But what are
plat-
some of her credentials?
I mean,
Platinum,
I
multi-platinum,
think
right?
over 32 million records sold worldwide.
Hmm.
I mean, huge hits. And I met her. Everything has a networking story, but John Rich, it's like 6 degrees of schwei. I mean, it's like, how did I get to Jewel? I mean, that one's really quick. It's like John Rich, Jewel. He produced
Yes.
her record. She did a country record, and she called me for advice on putting together a band and a crew for her tour.
Yeah.
And it was like, and I said, what am I, chopped liver? And she goes, oh, I can't steal you from Big and Rich. And I said, you don't have to. I'm leaving at the end of the year. They already know. And I think this was in mid-October. And she's like, oh my God, really? And I said, yeah, you call John if you're concerned about it. She didn't have to call John. But so I wound up working with her.
For how long? You were with, yeah, you're friends with Jewel a long time,
Yeah.
right now at this
So
point?
yeah, 2008 was when we first worked together, worked for a solid year, full tour. Then in '09, I did basically traveled the world with her doing solo acoustic shows. It was just her and I and one other guy on the crew. She had a personal assistant now. So it was like four of us traveling around the world. It was a blast. And then she, was kind of taking a break. She didn't know what was next for her. So she needed to let me go. When I say let me go off of what they call in the business retainer. So I was getting paid. If there were months that went by that we didn't work, I was still getting a retainer, so that if something came up, she had to be my first priority.
Okay.
And it's pretty common in the business. But she was taking a break, so I took a break from her. But at the same time, she'd call me randomly. Hey, I got a gig. Are you available? Yeah, I was available. In 2013, she did her greatest hits tour. She's like, any chance you can, go out? At this point, I had started my own business. I had started a management company, and I had
Yes.
artists, most
Was
notably
that Clearview?
Clearview Artist Management. I still have it today. But the notable act that I had at the time was Nitty Gritty Dirt Band.
Mm-hmm.
For those of your viewers that haven't heard of them, I'm sure they've heard the song "Fishing in the Dark," and the band has many, many great hits. They've been around, 55 plus years now, and they're still going.
Absolutely.
And so I managed them from end of 2009 just until 2021. So a long time.
So, Steve, pause for one moment because,
Yeah.
For those that aren't watching this, right, this is something we put out on YouTube. But for those that are just listening at one of the many podcast platforms, you can't see that Steve has a bunch of beautiful records on the wall behind him, and he also has an award that's sitting there, and I have to call it out, and it's an Emmy. So that's pretty impressive. Could you tell us about that? I know it pertains to Nitty Gritty.
Yeah, so it is a Emmy Award for special event coverage. So it was a special event. It was for their 50th anniversary. Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and Friends celebrating 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I, along with two other guys, produced the special, and we won this Emmy Award for the special. It was aired. It still is airing all these years later. It came out in 2016. It's still airing all these years later on PBS. It was made. We made it and produced it for a PBS Pledge special.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done so well and helped raise so much money that it's still on today. And
congrats.
Thank
Congrats.
you.
Seriously, it's incredible. Like, how many people do I know that have won an Emmy? Oh, right. Just you.
It's really it's like one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. I got to go up and give the acceptance speech, and
I saw that. I was just going to ask, what was that like?
That was the most nerve-wracking thing I've done in my life. And what's funny is I'm in a room of my peers, like maybe 400 or 500 people. Meanwhile,
Yes.
I've stood on the stage at Gillette Stadium to a sold-out Gillette Stadium show for a Kenny Chesney concert, and I'm there with Big and Rich, and I'm standing on that stage to 100,000 people.
And it was fine. No big deal.
It was fine. Yeah. But now I have to talk and say something. Holy crap, what do I do? But it was an amazing experience. I mean, it was one of those, oh my God moments. Like, this can't even be real. Like, don't pinch me. You better just sucker punch me, because it just doesn't feel real, but it was real, and it's so special.
It is special. If I'm thinking about all the stories that you've shared with us, and you have a theme going, which is that I don't know if you know this about yourself, maybe you do, but you put it out there in the universe of what you're going to do. From everything you've just shared with us tonight. And I didn't know that this was coming, but I've been listening and I'm thinking, wow, he did it again. He did it again. And you say to people, hey, I'm going to come work for you, or I'm going to go work there and I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to go work there and I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to show up. You have so much grit. And do you know that about yourself, that you put it out there and say, hey, I'm going to come work for you, Jewel. I'm going to come work for you. Hey, Kenny, I'm going to come work for you.
So I wouldn't say that I know it about myself, but I believe you, and I believe it about myself, because I do believe that there's a power in positivity, and there's a power in manifesting your destiny. Saying, if you believe it and you truly believe it and you say it's going to happen, it will happen, because your determination your soul, your blood. I mean, it's all going towards that goal if that's what you want, and you can make it happen as long as you're willing to do one thing.
What's that?
And it's a really important thing. Not take no for an answer. And
Mm,
it's like the easiest thing, but it's the hardest thing for anybody, including myself, to get. Because when somebody says no, the easiest thing to do is accept it and say, okay. The hard thing and the hardest thing to do
yeah.
is to not accept it and say, I don't accept it. I heard it, but I don't accept it. So now I have to move on to that next stage of how I'm going to get there. And sometimes it's with that same person who gave you the no. Other times it's going to that other door that's still
Mm,
open and seeing if that's the one that you can walk through and it doesn't shut on you.
I
But
love that.
it's hard though. It
It
really
is
is
hard.
hard. But I'll tell you, the power of positivity is so true. And I think, Meg, when we were talking the other day, I told you about a documentary. It's a docu-series on Shaun
Mm,
White, the
mm-hmm.
snowboarder.
Yes.
And there is a point in that documentary where he gave up. He was like, okay, I got to be okay with winning silver. It was his last run he was about to do, but the guy, the Japanese snowboarder who had just done a run, had done the most amazing run, and Sean was in awe. He was like,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, okay, I'm okay. I'm gonna take silver. I'm gonna be okay with this. And he's talking about it. You hear him talking about it in real time, and then he overdubs over the silence as the camera is on him. And this is at the I think the Sochi Olympics, I think it was, and
Mm-hmm.
he's on the top of the mountain. He's about to go down to his run, and he's overdubbing, and he says, "And then I thought to myself, but what if I wasn't okay with silver?"
Yeah.
And he said, and so I believed that I wasn't going to be okay with silver. So I just knew that I wasn't going to be good with that.
Yeah.
And what did he do? He went down that pipe and threw down an insane run, and
I
he
saw that one.
won gold. He won gold. And
Yeah.
it just shows you, if his head wasn't in the right place, and think about it. We're talking about me, like, trying to get a job, and I'm going to go do that.
Yeah.
This guy is like going to jump, these crazy twists and turns and all this stuff, 100 feet in the air sometimes, out of the bottom of the pipe, and can kill himself. And he just willed it. He's like, I'm not going to be okay with silver. Bam, he gets the
It's
gold.
it's so true. You're right. We did talk about that, and you and I have always liked talking about these kind of things and about people that are successful and what their mindsets are. And that is the mindset of a champion. That is the mindset of somebody who pushes themselves. And I love how you just shared. It's about not taking no, but for an answer. And that is really tough. Like, how do you do that? Right. I think that's the question people have is how do you, I guess, get rid of that? I call it limiting beliefs. How do you put that aside and continue forward, not taking
It,
that person's no?
yeah, so it's not easy. I'll say that. And even to this day, no matter how many successes that I can talk about and go into, it's still very difficult for me. And sometimes I get in my own head. And luckily, I have an amazing support system. So sometimes I'll be laying in bed and kind of bashing myself, quite
Hmm,
honestly.
really?
Yeah, I talk down about me,
Mm,
um for no other reason, but maybe it's because I heard a no, or and sometimes it's not even that I heard a no. It's like I don't feel good about myself mentally, so I decide that, somebody says you should go maybe do this, and it's something I might want to do, and
mm,
I say I can't do it. I'm not that talented. I'm not capable of that. I can't do that. But then having a really amazing support network, and
okay.
having a beautiful, amazing fiance who supports everything I do. Yes,
Love that for you.
absolutely. The fact that she can say to me, hang on a minute, like,
Mm-hmm.
why are you talking about yourself like that? And she kind of puts me in check, and that's difficult too. It's not easy to hear a no or to break a cycle, but the more experience you have, and this is where the tweak is,
Okay.
if you have even one, you just need one. You need one no that you turned into a yes because of your attitude and your will to go do something. All you need is that one. Because if you're able to take that one and store it in your memory, and
Mm-hmm.
we all can do that, all you
Mm-hmm.
have to do is go back to that memory. You just have to go back and say, well, if I did it for this when all
Yeah.
the odds were against me, but all I had to do was say, nope, I'm determined. That's what I'm going to do. And it
Yes.
happened. That's how I can get out of the next one and the next one of me thinking that it's not going to happen. But there
Yeah.
are some times that, you just get stuck, and it's good to have that support network that can pull you out of it. And Meg, you're one of those people. I can talk to you. I could be in a down place. You might not know that I'm in a down place, but we can talk, and your positivity, it's infectious. You infect me with the positivity, and I'm able to be a better person that day or that week or that
Thank you.
month.
I'm glad
Yeah,
to hear that. I am.
it's
That makes me feel good. Thank you for sharing that. But I agree
absolutely.
with what you're saying. Having a support network, people that care about you, for others that are trying to figure out how do I get out of those tough times, because we all have them. And I love that you just shared you have them too, with the success that you've had and the records on the wall behind you and the awards and the people that you've worked with. You still have those tough moments and those
Yeah.
doubts. Can I do this next thing? You need someone to pull you out of it. And you need that, like you said, the memory bank, that file cabinet is in there, because our self-doubts will talk us out of. It's easier, right? It's easier to say, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. But it's just pulling that one thing out. I love that analogy. So,
Yeah, and you have to stay humble. I think
mm,
I don't, you asked me, so I'm talking about myself, which is
yes,
not
of
something I
course.
like to do. There are people that love to talk about themselves or talk about an award or an accomplishment. I really don't. It's not so, and that's why I'm so good behind the camera, so to speak, as we're on
Mm-hmm.
camera,
Mm-hmm.
but truly that's what's made me successful. I don't boast about what I've done. Now, I'm proud. I'm very proud of everything I've been able to do.
Sure.
And I'm even proud of my
I'm glad.
failures. I don't look at
Mm-hmm.
my failures as true failures. I look at my failures as that's how I got to do this, which was a success.
Yes.
We can't just, there's nobody in the world that's just successful. You have to have a lot of things to go wrong to get it
Yes.
right. And I've
Yes.
had plenty of wrong to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, not talking about it has been a great thing, because what I love to do, I love to be proud of what I've done. I
Mm-hmm.
love for somebody to walk into my office and they start the conversation. What the heck is this? Or what did you do to get that? And
Mm-hmm.
when you feel their excitement and their authenticity and them being genuine and really wanting to know more, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier to talk, because then you're not feeling like you're talking about yourself. You're talking about something that somebody genuinely wants to know about and has asked you about.
Sure.
And I think that's really important. Being humble is a really,
Absolutely.
really important thing.
It surely does play into it.
Yeah.
But well, this has been really lovely to talk to you today. I really mean it in
I
this
know it's
capacity. Thank you for
crazy.
sharing all your stories.
You asked me literally, I think, one question, and I just kept talking. This,
No, I've had a couple. I swear, I've had a couple. But
it's
it was
like,
easy to just let you go with it, because you kind of connected all the dots for us.
well, you got to promise me, if your viewers enjoy this, and meaning this specific episode, and I hope they do, at some point you
They
got to
sure
bring
will.
back for like Schwei version 2. We'll have to have like a mini series,
Oh,
that
absolutely.
has Schwei, only because I'm having so much fun. I love talking to you, Meg. It's like this.
Well, I
Uh,
feel the same, and I really actually think that you're onto something here, because I'm just getting started, and I really think that we have a small audience right now. I'm
yeah,
hoping that it grows, Steve. I'm hoping
yeah.
that it grows, and if so, I'd love to have you back. We'll definitely talk again. You have so much to share. I've always admired just who you are, the person that you are. That's why we've kept in touch and been friends all these years. So thank you for what you've shared with us today.
Oh my God. Thank you, Meg. I mean, your family, you guys are beautiful. You're just positive personality.
This is a love fest here.
It is, but what you bring to me has always been so positive. I mean, there's never been a moment, whether it was work, fun, just catching up, there's never been a moment that hasn't literally made me smile ear to ear, just big old grin whenever I get to converse with you. And sometimes it could be a text.
Absolutely. That means the world to me, Steve. So thank you everybody out there for listening. Thank you for those of you that have watched. I hope you've enjoyed these great stories and taken something out of it today. And we'll say goodbye for now.
Bye for now.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, bookmark this podcast and follow Megan on Instagram. Okay. Now for the disclaimer. This podcast is solely for educational and entertainment purposes. Megan is not a licensed therapist, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. Goodbye, everybody.